Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
You're watching Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Today, the three parties that make up the Pakatan Harapan coalition agreed to name Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim as their pick for Prime Minister if the coalition wins the next general election. This marks an official shift in the focus for the grouping after several failed attempts by Anwar to realise his claims of a parliamentary majority. In what Pakatan calls the Port Dickson resolution, the three parties reiterated their openness to cooperation with other stakeholders, their focus on the achievements of Pakatan-led states, and also called for Parliament to be reconvened. However, expectations of some quarters that there would be a discussion of leadership renewal in the pact did not materialise. Badrul Hisham Ismail joins us now. He's the Director of Programs for Iman Research. Badrul, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, I'm wondering, do you think it was a smart move by Pakatan to once more nominate Anwar Ibrahim as candidate for Prime Minister in the next general elections?
Well, I guess we have to look at from sort of two perspectives here. If we're talking about short term, then any decision is a good decision, especially if you're talking about election that is going to come in very short notice, like a few months' time. Prolonging the discussion of who's going to be the Prime Minister candidate or the leader of the pact will, delay any kind of mobilization for the election. So deciding on someone, regardless of who, is a good decision to make. But I guess if we're talking about long term, if we're talking about, building new generation of leaders and making sure there's, Pakatan Harapan can survive, in the long run, then, sticking to the same old people might not be, a good symbol to prove that they are committed in the long-term goal of, not only pushing for reform, but maintaining reform if they, got into power.
But if I could ask you about their own voter base and whether the voter base, and not political analysts, not, casual observers, but the voter base, their loyalists, do they want stability in terms of leadership, or are they themselves looking for renewal?
I would say both. I would say they want a renewal in a very stable environment. And, at different time, you have to prioritize different, aspect in a situation where things are fractured, uncertainty is, have been in the back of everyone's mind. So stability might be something that they need. And like I said earlier, it's not really about who they decided. It's about the fact that they actually decided on someone. Is the fact that it's a good it's a good thing that they do finally.
Can I ask you, are there any alternatives in Pakatan Harapan at the moment? I mean, within PH, who are the alternatives to leadership?
Well, of course, there are a lot of younger politicians that have been around for quite some time, even almost right after, or since Reformasi days. You have people like Saifuddin Nasution. You have people like Nurul Izzah herself. Even in Amanah, you have a person like Salahuddin, who's been around for a long time, and people know them as a national figure. So if they want to pick somebody else, they can. But, they just need to decide on it.
But do you think, though, in terms of Malaysian political culture, familiarity with figures is really an important part of the way in which parties operate? That while there might be more competent leaders, those, as you say, who represent a new generation and, a new way of thinking and doing things, that in fact there is some security that people find in the old figures. And so, therefore, we could have Dr. Mahathir in his 90s returning to lead the country. Is there something to be said about this impulse to cling on to the tried and tested, as it were?
I mean, you can have familiar faces, but they don't necessarily have to play the same role. As people go through life, people themselves play different roles. You are the child, and you are a brother or sister, and then you become the parent, and you become grandparent. So you can always be important to whoever that you are serving, whoever the community, either on a small scale community or a national scale. But the roles can be different. Just because you are still active in helping and running the political party in this context that we're talking about doesn't mean that you have to be the president. And look at PAS, for example. They have a Murshidul Am position and they have the president position, and they both play equal, if not, but slightly different role. So other parties can still do the same thing.
That's quite interesting. You're citing PAS as an example of, an evolving leadership role, perhaps some succession planning. Because I'm wondering, whether PKR is not unique in showing a lack of resolve in its succession planning. Looking at other parties, is this a political culture in Malaysia that succession planning doesn't seem to be inherent? That we don't seem to have the resolve for that. Or is it, just within PKR? Are you seeing this in other parties, PAS aside?
I think other parties have are facing something similar. Well, the only party that I know of that actually has a term limit for its leadership is DAP. They have a term limit for their Secretary General. So that forces, new leadership to come up or to be groomed for the next one. PAS has those two different, key positions that somewhat, put them in a way that they can move around different, individuals in their leadership playing different roles. But other parties doesn't seem to have that. Not just PKR. Even UMNO doesn't have it. Amanah doesn't have it. And I'm sure Bersatu and all that doesn't have that kind of term limit as well.
But in the last bit that we have, when you look down south, and there have been discussions about the PAP, when it looks at succession planning, they have a G4 and a G5, leadership lined up, preparing the public for expectations of, the rise of these individuals. Is that something to aspire to?
I'm not sure whether you want to tell Malaysians they should aspire to Singapore, but there are things that we can learn from that. And if we are really serious about grooming next generation, and not just one generation, but generations ahead, you need to put some mechanism in place to ensure that can happen, because you can't just rely on the mercy of one leader to groom others, because if you're in a position where they don't want to let go, and we've seen that in the country, we see that Anwar doesn't seem to want to let go. Even Mahathir hasn't been letting go, even when you try to jump into different parties, right? So having this kind of mechanism does put in place the kind of space for young people to think that they can have the chance to go into the next leadership.
All right, Badrul, thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
After this, we're going to turn our attention to the regions of Sabah and Sarawak and their increasingly important role in national coalition politics. Stay tuned to consider this.
Di wilayah Selkop,
kami hentikan induknya adalah Melayu Islam.
Orang yang membuat polisi.
Kalau itu yang dikehendaki, fine. Mungkin kita berbeza pandangan.
Tapi kita mempunyai kuasa yang boleh menentukan budaya di masa hadapan.
Polisi yang mesra wanita sudah tentu dia akan datang daripada pemimpin wanita.
Perang COVID-19.
Thank you so much for staying with Sharaad and I on Consider This. Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin visited Sarawak last week, his first since being appointed Prime Minister last year. During the visit, he announced that a Special Council on Malaysia Agreement 1963 would soon be making public its decision on the Federal Constitution Amendment on other matters related to Sabah and Sarawak. Now, there have been rumours circulating that the territories of Sabah and Sarawak would now no longer be known as states, but as regions. This was after Muhyiddin used the term in reference to Sarawak in a speech. Now, how would a reclassification of Sabah and Sarawak to regions to be on par with the peninsula within the Federation of Malaysia, how would that impact coalition dynamics at the federal level? Ivy Jugah is a lecturer at the Faculty of Administrative Sciences and Policy Studies at UiTM Sarawak. Ivy, good evening. Now, would a change in the official naming convention, would that be considered significant?
Based on my opinion, at this moment, on the political conflict in UMNO itself, it's actually in the context of Peninsular Malaysia, they give impact to the UMNO members itself, and not only the UMNO members itself, but also their at the grassroots level, their supporters. But in the context of Sarawak, it might be different.
So, Ivy, but you know, the question of this news, I mean, circulating around, and there have been several individuals, both in Sabah and Sarawak and also in the peninsula, talking about this issue of the change, you know, from wilaya, from negeri to wilaya, and seems like an important gesture. At least some commentators think, others think it's mere tokenism. What do you have, would you have a sense of how the general population in Sarawak feels about this? Your own peers, are they talking about this rumored change of term for both Sarawak and Sabah?
Okay, right. In my points of view, regarding on the change of that announced by our Prime Minister during his official visit to Sarawak, it's a over long due demand from state government itself. So for sure, on the part of on the sides of Sarawak state government itself, it's a good news for us. Especially in pertaining to the issues of Malaysian Agreement 63. Same goes to other related issues, like for example, in terms of the Constitution's law, Article 160. All right, so this is actually not only among the state government itself, but among the local level. This will be a very good news and the most long-awaited news for us as a Sarawakian here. On the issues of on the issue of Article 1+2 in Federal Constitution.
Right. Okay. So while we're on the topic of MA63, I want to ask you about, you know, I guess the long-standing quest to have more autonomy for Sarawak specifically, and you know, Abang Joe has reiterated that, you know, while GPS has chosen to support the Prime Minister, they're not officially part of Perikatan Nasional. And I'm wondering whether you think GPS's support is contingent on Perikatan delivering on that promised autonomy, especially before the region's elections or Sarawak elections, and also before the general elections.
Yeah. Okay. Right. On the pertaining issues, regarding the support of our CM of Sarawak, on our current Prime Minister, it's a good move actually, right? Especially in the context of for both general election itself is coming soon. Same goes to our Sarawak state election. So this is the time for both government to work together, to make sure that they can give the base for both federal level and also for state level, all right? And back then, both government, they must ensure a win-win situation, because in politics we call this as a political patronage, right? In which win-win situations there, right? So,
Ivy, I want to ask you a question in line with some of the theme of tonight's show, which is political renewal. Coming up to the next, Sarawak election or the territorial election, do you think that Sarawakians are going to be given a new, fresh slate of leaders, or are Sarawakians going to be faced with pretty much the traditional slate of leaders? What is it that Sarawakians themselves as voters want? Do they want to see renewal in political leadership?
Okay, all right. So regarding on the issues of, this is more towards on the voters' preference while they're choosing their candidate during an election, right? Okay. In Sarawak itself, I'm sure we are unique from Peninsula Malaysia in terms of voting preference. Yeah. For long over decade, Barisan Nasional remains strong in Sarawak. Yeah, but after the last general elections, yeah, in 2018. It's a quite we can see there is some changes. Yeah, not only most of the time in Sarawak, okay, we are using the most famous concept used in terms of campaigning. The strategy used by party is more on political development. Yeah, they use the political issue, the political development concept. Right. So due to this, yeah, for the future, for next state election. When we look at again on the result of the general elections in Sarawak, yeah, it's quite interesting actually, yeah, because it's quite unpredictable to me, on my opinion, right? It's quite unpredictable and due to the fact that some issues like, I mean, for local issues itself, we have the local opposition parties that might compete with well-known GPS, yeah, right? So when we talk about the voting preferences itself, it's quite quite unpredictable, yeah, right? In terms of politics, especially in terms of for state election. Yeah.
All right, Ivy, thank you for joining us on the show. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
After this, we're going to be discussing the impact of that controversial audio clip that emerged earlier this week. All of that in just a couple of minutes, so stay tuned.
Di wilayah Selcom, kami
bersedia hentikan induknya adalah Melayu
balik kepada
Islam.
orang yang membuat polisi.
Kalau itu yang dikehendaki, fine. Mungkin kita berbeza pandangan.
Tapi kita mempunyai kuasa yang boleh menentukan budaya di masa hadapan.
Polisi yang mesra wanita sudah tentu dia akan datang daripada pemimpin wanita.
Perang COVID-19 masih belum berakhir.
Hi, if you've just joined us, you're watching Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. With me is Sharaad Kuttan. In grand Malaysian tradition, an audio clip purportedly between UMNO President Zahid Hamidi and PKR President Anwar Ibrahim has set tongues wagging this week. Zahid's political foes within his party have seized upon the recording in a bid to oust him. So what lies ahead for UMNO leadership? Let's ask Associate Professor Dr Hamidin Hamid. He's a political analyst with University Malaya. Hamidin, thank you so much for being on the show with us. Now, that recording, it's created a lot of noise, but I'm just wondering, will it have a material impact on Zahid Hamidi? Is it likely to put Zahid Hamidi's position of leadership in UMNO in jeopardy?
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for having me. Yes, I think for most of us, the analysts, I don't think we were surprised with the revealing of the videotapes of the audio of allegedly conversation between Anwar Ibrahim and Zahid Hamidi. Because for us, we've seen it's coming. It must be some reaction after what happened in the last General Assembly of UMNO, where Zahid made certain decision which is not popular, even among his own party. So looking at the current situation and looking at what happened at the General Assembly of UMNO, I think Zahid Hamidi now is very much looking towards the tail end of the time as a president of UMNO. I think the best for me, looking at the current situation, the best way for Zahid is very much to negotiate his exit from UMNO, in my point of view, because we can look and we can see from what's happening, the chorus for him to call for general election of UMNO is getting louder and louder by days and getting momentum as it is as we speak now.
Hamidin, could Zayed, in fact, resist those calls? I mean, is there anything in the Constitution that could force his opponents to have that election, that party election, or for him to actually prevent it from happening?
I think, Sharaad, I think the big advantage of Zahid Hamidi now, he is the president of UMNO. I think, in my view, he is using the presidency to very much to give a lifeline for his political career. Obviously, as a president, I think he brings a lot of clout in influencing the decision, especially in the MKT. And in the Constitution, the MKT can delay and can decide. But so far, in my point of view, Zahid still have some grips on the MKT. So I don't see that MKT will make the decision as soon as possible. But depends, as I said just now, it depends on how strong the voice to disagree with Zahid. And the way I see it, I think the voice are getting stronger and stronger. Even the General Assembly doesn't really much, in my point of view, give a clear mandate for Zahid to have a clear leadership role in UMNO as it is now.
Can I come back to the impact of that audio clip, Hamidin? I mean, you're saying that perhaps Zahid's position is in jeopardy. I'm wondering if we could juxtapose that against Anwar. Anwar's position doesn't seem to be in any jeopardy. In fact, Pakatan Harapan just named him as a PM candidate for the next general elections. What's the difference there? How does this jive to you?
I think indeed. If you look at Melisa, if you remember a couple of months ago, there was another revealing facts came out. I remember about the letters in proposing to support Anwar Ibrahim to become Prime Minister signed by Zahid Hamidi and Najib Razak, meaning get the UMNO, where the Anwar came out with the famous words of formidable, strong, to become a Prime Minister. But I think, yes, I'm surprised why Pakatan Harapan to some extent make a very fast decision in making sure that Anwar will lead them towards the next general election. In my point of view, this is very much to show that there is some problem even within the Pakatan Harapan looking at the leadership issues. It's not just within UMNO. And I think in my point of view, yes, they want to make it clear that Anwar is their candidate for prime ministership. But in my point of view, does that a right decision? Looking at it, as you said just now, the problem faced by UMNO within the PKR and also relationship between Anwar and UMNO, what that will be reacted by the voters at large. I think PKR is taking a big gamble in putting Anwar as a future prime minister, long way before call for the election.
Hamidin, I wonder if you could help us contrast these two parties that we're talking about. UMNO having that electoral setback in 2018, and of course the Pakatan Harapan government collapsing about a year ago. Do you see those crises precipitating a rethink about those parties and leadership? What has happened in UMNO since 2018 that suggests they understand the value or the importance of succession, and also by contrast, Pakatan Harapan, have they learned any lessons from the debacle they suffered last year?
I think, Sharaad, thank you. I think you share with one more, I think the top priority of my concern when we analyze Malaysian politics. I always highlight that one of the biggest problems in Malaysian politics is leadership, and it's about succession. First, why? Because I think most of Malaysian parties don't have the succession plan. Unless, in my point of view, in the structure, DAP who limited the numbers. But when it comes to the program of the parties, the structure of the party, we don't see any structure that allow the formations of future leaders. Any party in Malaysia. I think that's very much one of the biggest weaknesses of Malaysian political culture. And with that, in my point of view, as you said, Pakatan Harapan doesn't really take good advantage of what happened during the crisis. And for UMNO also, I think UMNO should look what happened after Mahathir left, in my point of view, with a very fast succession plan failed to Abdullah and Abdullah to Najib.
Hamidin,
so it is a big issue.
Why is it that it doesn't seem to be, that succession planning doesn't seem to be part of the Malaysian political culture? Is it just an inability of old leaders to let go of power?
Not just that, Melisa. I think it's very much go deep to the culture of Malaysian, the psychic of the voters, the psychics of the members of the party. The bigger picture is the culture of Malaysian to some extent. We are not very much a clear, structured society. We are, when we come to leadership, for example, we are looking at a feudal approach in terms of age, respectability, and others, rather than looking at a merit base and looking at the age and many other factors that be synonym is what considered as a modern character of leadership. So this is where, in my point of view, it's not only political culture, it's involved also with the psychic and the culture of Malaysian at large.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for speaking with us tonight, Hamidin. We really appreciate your time. Thank you. That's all we have for you on this episode of Consider This. But a quick reminder, don't forget to get all the latest news and information on COVID-19 vaccines at astroawani.com and the Astro Awani app. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan, signing off the evening.
We will be back with you same time next week. Till then.
Good night.